Hi there, welcome to Games Over More Coffee. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to stuff that is not Games Over Coffee, my main channel. Welcome to Dev Brew. This is where indie developers submit their games and I give feedback on their game design. My name is Devon and today is a really interesting video because this one was ordered off of Fiverr. So if you don't know, I have a Fiverr account. You can go over there and order a video. That is this. Yeah, this person didn't have to wait for me to randomly select them. This video is for Voyager by Planetary Games. So thank you so much for submitting this game. It's really, really difficult to look at design rules for artistic games, but it's the stuff that I have the most fun with because it takes a lot of digging, a lot of studying, but that's the stuff I love. So this was a lot of fun. This was a really, really interesting journey. We're gonna go ahead and get right into it. In Dev Brew, what we try to do is we're trying to find the heart of the experience in this game. And then upon finding that heart, we'll try to strengthen the experience. So what I want to start out with is what kind of experience does Voyager want to deliver? This was the experience that they wanted. They said they want wonder and exploration while having themes of creating your own journey. They also had a specific description of their game on Steam. Let gravity guide you, take it easy, and create your own gorgeous emergent journey. So there's three things that we have to look at. There's relaxation, emergence, and discovery. Not necessarily in that order. How does Voyager try to deliver this experience that it wants to deliver? It does so through two things mainly, and that's minimalism and kind of this chill vibe throughout the whole thing. So if you look at this game is really chill. This game has a YouTube channel. It also has a Spotify account, I think, for the AOST. It's all about lo-fi. This whole game is just drenched in this aesthetic of lo-fi, chill, groove, just kind of just relax, just do your thing. This game very much is minimalistic. It's very chill. It doesn't try to do a whole lot. The way that this game plays doesn't really feel like the experience that they want to deliver. The goal of the game, you have this star and you're controlling this little satellite or ship or whatever, and you're rotating or orbiting around the star, and you can boost your little ship, boost your ship, and it starts to orbit, a little bit longer. And the idea is to orbit around the star until you find all the necessary planets that there are. So around the star is just completely dark, and then as soon as you touch a planet, then it lights up. The game has different levels. Each one has a little bit more planets, and some of them are bigger, some of them are smaller, some of them have more elliptical orbits. The goal of the game is to find these planets, but the control of the game is not necessarily about discovery. It's more about emergence, because when your ship flies, it leaves a little trail around. And what happens is, because of all these really interesting gravitational pulls from everywhere, you end up having this like really crazy looking pattern that you make, this emergent, interesting pattern that happens. And what you end up with is a really interesting looking kind of artistic thing that you've made while trying to find all these planets. Now, what's kind of strange here is that the goal of the game is to find the planets, and yet, because of all of this gravitational pull and everything like that, you don't really have a whole lot of control. Your curiosity comes up, right? You find that your gravity is being shifted when you move your ship around, and you're like, oh, hey, there must be a planet over there. I'm going to try to find it. But because you can't really influence your ship's direction that much, like you have to move your mouse and then kind of, spin your ship around one way, it's very tricky, and you end up fighting gravity a whole lot. And because of that fighting the gravity, it's no longer this relaxing kind of chill vibe. It's now the player is trying to fight against the system in order to find what they're trying to do, which is uncover all these planets. It mostly feels like a game that you just have to click and then let your ship just go until it automatically lands on a planet by itself, which doesn't really feel like you're discovering anything. It just kind of feels like your ship just found something. You're like, oh, there it was. Because the ship is very difficult to steer, then the control that you have of the ship doesn't really match the goal so much. The goal is to go out and discover, and the control is more just let things be and just kind of just let the ship do whatever it wants. So it kind of has this conflicting nature about it. And because of that, it does get kind of boring. Because you keep fighting the system, because you're not allowed to express yourself in this way, it kind of feels like the game doesn't want you to play it at that point. To better achieve this kind of relaxation, I think what should happen here is that the player needs to be given a lot of control. And this is where we get into the idea of what game design is and what a core game loop is. If you're trying to create a certain experience in your game, You have to find out what it is that the player is experiencing. What is it that they're doing, and that's your game. For example, I always bring this up every single episode, Super Mario 64. Miyamoto made a little character that he could run and jump around with and everything. Then once he got that down, then he made levels because he wanted to challenge that type of movement. And so now the game becomes about the movement. He created a cohesive game by creating the experience first that he wanted, and then created a game around that experience. If this game is about relaxation, if this game is about just kind of chilling, just letting go and whatever, then that's what the player needs to feel. They need to control something that makes them feel relaxed. So when I think of something like that, it's about giving the player all of the control and letting them control the very pacing of the game. When I think about that kind of control, I think of games that have been around for a long time. Games that are more or less comfort games, just games that you go back to because you know you can control them so well. For example, Super Mario Bros., right? If you talk to any avid platformer person, a person who loves platforming games, they'll probably play Super Mario Bros. As a relaxation thing, which sounds kind of weird, right? Because Super Mario Bros. Is an action game. It's challenging. Why would anyone relax with that game? And it's because they've played it over and over and over to the point to where they've basically mastered the entire game. And so playing it is more of just an exercise. It's just, they have full control over the game now. They feel like they've mastered everything. So going through the movements is just relaxing. Same with a game like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. That used to be a game that I played all the time because I could pull off million-point combos just anytime I wanted to. It was more just a zen experience. It was just, I'm so familiar with the mechanics, I can just go ahead and just play the game and just move through it without having to reach any kind of barrier. There's other games that are designed to do this, and those games are games like Flower, for example. The idea is flying through the air and uncovering other flowers and bringing life back to everything just by proximity. What's relaxing about that is that the player does have a goal. The goal is to, bring life back to all these dead plants, but the player has full control over their pacing of the game, right? The game is not timed in any way, at least not that I know of, because I've only played it a little bit. You can go wherever you want, basically, and it's up to the player to proceed as they see fit. Same with a game called Infinity Loop. Infinity Loop is a game that's made for the phone. It's a mobile game that's made to just be relaxing. The game is a puzzle game. It does have a challenge there, but the idea is that the challenge is almost non-existent because the player, all they do is they tap pieces to rotate them until they all link together. And if you haven't got it, just keep tapping until you do, right? That's basically all it is. And that's what makes such a relaxing game, is because you control the pacing of the game. You just control everything there is about it. In Voyager, you do control the pacing of the game in Voyager, but you don't control the discovery, the actual connecting with the planets. And because that system is a little conflicting, because you don't have control over actually finding these planets, it's more of an emergent process, or just more of an accidental process even. Because you don't have the control to discover the planets that you're told to discover, you have a missing link there. Speaking of discovery, that's another thing that we want to talk about, is like, in order to better achieve discovery, you have to be able to give the player enough control to satisfy their curiosity. If we think about other games that are driven by curiosity and really lead to a lot of discovery, I think about games like The Witness. In order to play the game The Witness, you have to discover a lot of things, because the game is not really made in a linear way. It's just kind of a giant level that the player has to go and find their way. And because they're finding their own way, because everything is controlled by the player, then they're discovering a lot of things, right? You look at something and it gets the better of your mind and you're thinking, what is that supposed to do? And then so you go and interact with it, find out you can't, interact with something else, find out you can, and then try putting things together with this puzzle mentality that you have, and then satisfying your curiosity by going over to another place and applying that kind of skill that you built up. The same thing happens in a game like Outer Wilds. In Outer Wilds, it's a game about discovery. The whole idea is about going over to areas that, again, have a curious nature about them. And because you have the control of being able to go to those areas and find out what those things are, then you're able to satisfy that curiosity. I guess I would say creating a discovery kind of experience is about satisfying curiosity through control. And now I want to talk about one thing that I think this game is amazing at, and that's Emergence. I think this game is perfectly suited for Emergence, with the idea of being lo-fi, with the idea of making your own trails and everyone has a unique journey, creating patterns that are always unique, and that's really interesting. But in order to make it feel like it's the point of the game, we need to feel ownership. The player needs to feel in ownership over the pattern that they've created, because right now it feels like it's almost happenstance. It feels like after your ship goes off, and you try to control it a little bit, you might create some sort of bends and stuff that you intended to create, but most of the time you're focused on trying to land on a certain planet. A lot of the times the planets themselves are controlling the direction in which you go, so you don't really have a lot of control over your trail, but you kind of do. So in order to create more ownership of that trail, what I would like to do is look at some other games that the Emergence you can't create, but the Emergence you feel like you own once you've started its journey. So one of those games is Electroplankton for Nintendo DS. One of my favorite parts of Electroplankton is controlling these little pink dudes. And what's nice about this is that you don't actually control them at all. You control the leaves. What happens is these plankton are shot out of a leaf one way, and then they land on these other leaves and create some sort of musical tone when they bounce on that leaf. And you're creating, again, an emergence of music. It feels like when you've created something like that, that you feel the ownership over it because of the type of control that you had. You allowed that pattern to happen. Another thing is a real-world application of Emergence, and that's sand pendulums. Sand pendulums are so fun to just look at, to just straight look at. And you might see where I'm going with this with your game, because when you look at a sand pendulum, it's not something that it's just doing by itself. It is, but you're the one who started it, right? You take the pendulum, take it, drop it, and now pattern that it creates, you feel ownership over, and you can't help but be mesmerized because there's randomness in this area, but it's organized chaos, right? It's something that you, again, allowed to happen. So again, this is what I mean with your game. What I'd want to do is create a way for the player to allow these patterns to happen. I looked at one of your videos on YouTube, and you had a video that had like this title that showed a big arrow that said gravity, and I clicked on it, and it was this really interesting pattern that was being created with the ship, and you called it harmonics, and that's the same thing that happens with sand pendulums, where you create these types of really emergent patterns that are really interesting to look at. When I saw that video, I felt like that's the thing that this game should be about. I should be able to have a ship, send it on its way, and then because of the things that are surrounding it, it creates a unique pattern, and I want to be able to feel ownership over that pattern, either by just not being able to control the ship at all, except for the first part, just, launch it in one direction and then see what happens, or by maybe me placing planets in their areas so that I can allow the ship to, cause different type of weird gravitational, traveling things. But the idea is that we're creating this pattern by the ship traveling itself. And that's the thing that we want to feel ownership over. The reason why we don't feel ownership over that pattern right now is because the game is more focused on discovering planets. And so we have these two different things. We have emergence and discovery that are both kind of at odds with each other because both of them require different kinds of things. Discovery requires a lot of control, and emergence kind of just requires a type of ownership in the very beginning, but then after that, just no control, right? So no control versus a lot of control, and we're trying to shove both of those things together. So I think this game really, really works well as an emergent kind of art, exactly like a sand pendulum. I want to see, just like your video that you showed on YouTube, I want to be able to create something like that. I want to see that kind of stuff. In fact, one of the things that got on my nerves a little bit when I played the game was I was able to create some really interesting patterns, and then once I accidentally landed on the last planet, the level moved forward, and I didn't want to move forward. I wanted to keep creating really interesting patterns. In fact, that's what I thought that the endless mode was going to be, was just continuously creating patterns until I felt like I'm gonna stop now. But it didn't. It kind of controlled the pacing for me, and I didn't want that. So in the end, what we want to do is look at what we're letting the player control. What are they doing in the game? That is the experience that we're delivering, right? So whatever the player is doing, that's the experience that we're delivering. If we want the player to feel like they're relaxing, just watching an emergent art play out, then that's what we need to do. We need to give them a sense of control or sense of ownership. After they instigate this kind of emergence pattern, then just let them sit back and watch it, right? Because that's the thing that you want. That being said, that's pretty much everything that I thought was the main idea of the game. I want to quickly go over some really small design things that I felt like could be improved. But yeah, that's basically the biggest thing that I wanted to talk about. One of the smaller design things that I found issue with was the cursor itself. So when you start the game and you have the cursor is customized, right? So it's like this little circle with an arrow pointing, and it looks like it does something. When you're controlling your ship, when you have the game and you're playing it, the cursor doesn't really change as far as I can remember. And I kept trying to figure out exactly what it was. And in fact, I didn't even know that it was that the position of the cursor was related to the thrusting of the ship, because there was no connection there. I didn't move the cursor at all because it didn't show me anything. It didn't tell me that the cursor is related somehow to the ship. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was launching your ship off of a planet after you've landed on one. So you land on a planet and then it starts rotating this arrow, or what seems to be an arrow. I'm pretty sure it's an arrow. And what I kept expecting to happen was anytime that I would click, that maybe it would launch in the direction of the arrow, right? So the arrow is pointing one way. I thought it would go that way off the front of the arrow. But that never happened. In fact, it launches from the back, and it doesn't really go in the direction of the arrow, not that I saw anyway. So I'm wondering, maybe is that thing not even an arrow, and is it just a line that connects your ship to the planet? I'm not really sure. So that is everything. Thank you so much for submitting this game to me. Like I said, I had a lot of fun trying to analyze everything. There's a lot of stuff about minimalism in games that is very difficult to do in design. And so I really hope to see more emergence in this game, and I hope to see more control of that emergence, or maybe different modes or something like that, something where the player feels ownership over the type of art that they've created in this kind of sand pendulum in space kind of game. Really interesting stuff. Thank you so much for watching. And again, if you wanted a video like this, you can go to Fiverr and check that out. This is Games Over More Coffee. My name is Devon. Thanks for watching.